Welcome to the Kids Eating Broccoli podcast, where we believe that raising healthy kids shouldn't be complicated. Our mission is to inspire 20 million families worldwide to take the steps to raise the healthiest generation in our history. We'll interview some of the world's leading experts in nutrition, human potential, and children's health, as well as extraordinary chefs and foodies to gain insight into simple, fun, and creative ways to introduce natural health into homes across this planet. Hi there, welcome back to the Kids Eating Broccoli podcast. For our next episode, we brought in a guest, Jenny Friedman. She's a registered dietitian, and she works with families and with kids with some different health challenges and helping them to change and improve dietary habits to help with the different stuff going on with their health. And she's going to share with us some really cool stuff about picky eating in general and some tips that anyone, it sounds like, any parent can use with their kids. So I'd love to just jump in and by you telling us a little bit about yourself and tell us how you got to be doing what you're doing today.
Of course, thank you. I am a registered dietitian. I help parents create the best nutrition plan for their child with autism to improve health and optimize diet quality and also to manage autism symptoms. As you mentioned, a big part of this is resolving feeding issues and selective eating. So I'm excited to talk about that today. I didn't get here in a straight line, and unlike a lot of dietitians, I didn't really have one of those aha moments, but everything ended up coming together really nicely. So I decided to study nutrition because I was really interested in the idea of food as medicine. And once I was in school, along the way, I became very interested in how we feed kids. I was initially expecting to end up in policy, but I started working in schools in New York City, teaching children nutrition and science and helping to instill healthy eating as a lifelong habit. And as I was doing that work, it's kind of impossible to ignore some of the barriers that children have to making this a reality. For some, it's very natural. They understand it. And while they may have some social and environmental barriers, it's obvious that there are some children where, just kind of giving them the tools is not enough. And autism was one of the conditions that jumped out to me a lot while I was doing this sort of research and coming across all of this. So it ended up, like I said, kind of coming full circle and being really nice, where autism is one of those things where food really is medicine. We can start to see really amazing turnaround and improvements in children on the spectrum when we start to optimize diet, but getting there is a challenge. And so that's where the kind of nutrition education and starting to change taste buds and habits starts to come in.
Cool. So why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us some of the best things you've seen that work well for kids who, are called picky eating or have a limited diet, or, because this is something, of course, you've run into a lot in the world of working with families with autistic kids and symptoms, but even kids who seem, who have relatively normal health, we often run into picky eating as an issue as well. So this is a great topic. I'm excited that we're talking about this today because it's so important. And there's a lot of different ideas, that you hear out there. So I'd love to hear from you working with this, what you find works best. What do you share with someone if that's what they start with?
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. I think that there's probably very few households that have not come across picky eating at some point. So I'm very happy to talk about it. I think one of the the most important foundations behind overcoming selective eating or any sort of eating struggle is exposure and exploration. So giving children the opportunity to kind of get their hands dirty and really get to know food. Often, if you think about it, there's, even from when they're very young children, the food just comes out. They're not really involved in the other side, and we're expecting them to eat it. And that can be a very off-putting situation for some children. Especially anyone who has some sort of sensory challenge or maybe food allergies or intolerances. It's a little off-putting. So I like to work on the exposure and the exploration part. And there's a number of ways that you can do that where you don't even have to get into the kitchen. So a ton of ideas. You could, I love gardening, or, if you don't have the opportunity to garden, even just growing some things at home. Peas and herbs are a really great way to do this. Children who are involved in planting food definitely tend to be children who will eat that food. Um, Food selection is a big one. So you can just bring in your child along to the market, to the grocery store, the farmer's market, even if they're not ready to touch or explore or make any choices, just that exposure and being there is great. And it's an opportunity for discussion as well. So I think anytime when you can start discussing the health benefits of food, learning more about food, is it a fruit or a vegetable, and what makes it, what makes something these things, how you can use that food, where does it come from? All of those are really wonderful opportunities for beginning that exploration phase.
Cool.
There's a lot. Yep,
Yeah,
there's a
no,
lot
keep
more.
going. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, so that exposure, like I said, really anything that you can do, getting outside of the kitchen. So, food play is another really fun one. It can be something a little more obvious, like shelling peas or shucking corn, or it can be something like using food as stamps or creating a Mr. Potato Head. Who can, bite the celery, make the loudest noise. You can clean food. That's really fun for a lot of children when they get to play in water, clean out pumpkin seeds or clean a dirty root vegetable or something like that. Even just playing with food, to make art, or as a game to, bingo or tic-tac-toe, something like that. Just, it's the more you're touching and feeling and getting to know food, those eventually lead to, potentially tasting food down the road.
So do you think that, because you began this little section about how even from a young age, food is just something that sort of, shows up at the table. And it sounds like a lot of these are for the purpose of having us have more, maybe our kids have more of a relationship with the food, like gardening or farmers markets. And what do you think it is about that? I mean, there's something that sort of seems self-evident about why that would help, but if a child, maybe has like sensory things going on, how does something like that, just getting to know the food more, going to translate into them not having, the reaction they have to something that's crunchy or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, so I think it is, a lot of it's just about expectation, and I think being in control as well. So, research shows that the numbers are different, but it can take, let's say, at least 10 and usually a lot more exposures to a new food for a child to eventually decide that they're ready to eat that. So I think a lot of it is just getting over the fear of something new. And so the more you get to know it, the more you understand it, and you can expect what that's going to be like. And definitely the sensory issues, that can be a long process and very complicated, but it's, I think, just starting to know what to expect. And if you feel it on your skin first, and if you're familiar with the smell, then it's less likely to be, I think, really jarring once you put it in your mouth, especially if it's one of those foods that, starts to change texture as you eat it.
Mm-hmm. And at the beginning, or in our pre-chat, I guess, you mentioned that kind of the way you work with families is sort of two phases. I don't know if you use those words, but kind of starting with helping with what the diet already is before, and then the next phase being into making the changes. How does that relate to what we're talking about in terms of getting to know the food more and so forth?
Yeah, so a lot of selective eaters, and definitely children who have any sort of feeding challenge, tend to have very limited diets. And this can often, I think, be related to some of the symptoms that we're seeing and trying to resolve. So trying to modify that diet and expand the diet by incorporating, more of those healthy foods and eliminating some of the less healthy foods, it's the first step, but it's often just not that easy. It's oftentimes, there's a lot of reasons why those less healthy foods are preferred. It's sometimes due to the texture, or due to, those big flavors. And so, getting your child, saying just eat more fruits and vegetables, eat fewer processed foods, isn't that simple for a lot of people. There's, or for a lot of children and a lot of families, there's these barriers that you need to overcome. And so just the more that a child, and sometimes they haven't even been exposed to that. So it's, to those types of foods. So it's as simple as just starting to learn what they are.
Mm-hmm. So do you mean you would start by introducing some of the new healthier foods without necessarily taking out the unhealthy foods first? Is that kind of what I'm getting?
No, it's definitely a balance. So you want to make sure that there's something left for the child to eat. And it kind of, I think, really depends on the children. Some children will do better if they can have some of their comfortable foods while you work on introducing some new ones. Some will be okay as you start to wean. I think, as you start to wean out some of those things you're trying to eliminate. And some are, really receptive to alternatives. A child who loves muffins might be okay starting to see some vegetables turning up in those muffins. Some totally won't be okay veering from their preferred brand. So, it really depends. And as with anything, you need to meet the child where they're at and go from there.
Sure. So we've talked about, getting them involved in the gardening or in the shopping or even the conversations, food play, these type of things. So these are all things kind of beforehand, I guess. What about when you're actually in those moments, at the table having those struggles? How do you help parents with those moments?
Definitely. Parents need a lot of support with this. It's not easy. So there are a couple of different things you can do here. And I think the first one is to remember she's a dietitian. I believe she's also a counselor, Ellen Satter. She came up with the idea of the division of responsibility, and I think that has come up on your podcast before, but as a refresher, it's just that the parent is in control of saying what you're eating and when you're eating, and it's the child's prerogative to say how much or if, and no thank you and all of that. So that's important to remember. And in that vein, I recommend that parents create an eating structure, some sort of schedule and plan, so the child can expect 3 meals a day, 2 snacks, and knows when they will be. And within that, also kind of what you can expect at the meal time and what the behavior expectations are. There's a couple of different ways that you can go about introducing new food. So one would be family meals are a great opportunity, family style meals rather, where you have all of the food out on the table, all of the options, and either the parents can help serve, or if the child's old enough, they can they can serve themselves and choose their own portion. That's one great way. Sometimes it's helpful to have a tasting plate where you can put some of the new foods that you want to be there, that you're trying to introduce, just so they're there. And the option is that you can pick them, you can taste them if you like, or maybe just pick them up and give them a little smell or a little lick. It's also helpful when you're introducing new foods. You can include 3 foods. One food, a safe food that you know that your child loves. One kind of okay food that they like, and also then the new food that you're learning to like. So those are a couple of tactics, and I would say that the table isn't the best place to put pressure and to really have any expectation even. Try to have a neutral base, and it's more of those exposure activities where you can maybe encourage, you're playing with that food, that's fun. Why don't you give it a little smell? Can you like this food? Do you want to try this food? That's one of the reasons cooking is so great. Inviting kids into the kitchen is because as you're cooking, it's natural to taste as you go. And so that's a wonderful opportunity for kids to try a new food in a low pressure way. And of course, when they're cooking, they're more likely to want to eat the end product.
Mm-hmm. Hey there, just wanted to drop in for a quick message about a new supplement that I have been recommending quite a bit, and that is CBD oil. CBD oil is known as cannabidiol, and it's an extract, in this case, from the industrial hemp plant. And it has amazing benefits we see with pain, with inflammation, anxiety, sleep troubles, but also tremendously with children with ADHD symptoms. So I recommend using the brand HempWorks. That is the one that I have partnered with, in part because they grow their hemp organically in the US. They use a CO2 extraction method, so it's solvent free. And each batch is third-party tested for potency and purity, which is important because right now, the CBD industry is not very well regulated. And it turns out there was a recent study of about 30 of the top brands, and 70% of those brands did not have the amount of CBD that they claim to on the label. Some of them had no CBD at all, and 40% of them had ingredients in there that were not listed, things like heavy metals and dangerous solvents. So it's vital to use a brand that's been vetted and that you know is what it says it is and is pure. So HempWorks is that, and the third-party testing for each batch is available to look at online. If you want to know more or to order some to try it out yourself, you can go to drellisorcbd.com, which is drellisorcbd.com. Again, drellisorcbd.com. And you're certainly welcome to find me on Facebook or social media if you want to ask me any other questions about it. Oh, and by the way, right now, HempWorks has a 60-day empty bottle money-back guarantee, so there's really no risk to try it out. Order one, try it out, 30 to 60 days. If it's not working for you, if you don't like it, you can send it back, even if the bottle's empty, and get a full refund. All right, I'm going to send you back to the show now. Thanks for listening. Cool. So, what do you think about like doing the, I don't know, hiding food in foods? What's your take on that? Because I hear different sides of that. You know, like, well, one, you know, like hide vegetables in there. I know you mentioned some vegetables in the muffin. Mm-hmm. You didn't exactly say hide them in there. I was just curious your take on that side of things.
You know, it is not my favorite. I think the more open you can be about the whole process, the better it is. And it's also not necessarily teaching, I think, what the goal is. The goal is to really expand the diet. If the child doesn't know that they're eating carrots, then is that doing any good? Of course, they're getting to know the flavor, and I do think that's wonderful. So it might be appropriate for some kids, and parents know their children the best. My biggest fear is that some children can pick this out immediately, and then they become very distrusting of the food that they're being served. And so I would never want that to happen. I think it should always be safe and open in that sense. But parents know their children. And of course, if you're doing this before your child even knows what they're eating, then that's a great opportunity just to get the flavors in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, definitely interesting what you were saying at the beginning in our pre-chat that, it sounds like your primary work is working with families with kids with autism on expanding their diet and dietary interventions. I'd love to hear a little specifically to that, because some of our audience certainly has kids with ADHD and autism and in that spectrum, because that's particular. I know we've sort of been broadening out in general to kids in general, but are there particular challenges that you see in that population specific to your work with them, and what are some of the things you've found that have helped? And then I'd also love if you're happy to share some of the changes you've seen with when parents have done the work and had their kids change their diet, with kind of symptomatic changes that we've been seeing.
Definitely, of course. So there's a lot that could be going on with food in children on the spectrum, and definitely as well with ADHD. So some of the main things are sensory issues. Just sensory food aversions can be, very often it is the preference for sameness. So that might be the same brand of food or the same type of food. The sensory issues can impact kind of mealtime behaviors, that children don't like to eat with other people or where there are certain noises. Often we're seeing food sensitivities that are undiagnosed. We can see a lot of belly issues as well, sometimes constipation, difficulty digesting. So there's definitely a lot going on there, but what it comes down to is a very limited diet. So this ends up kind of manifesting as sometimes nutrient deficiencies, sometimes children, growth issues or overweight, underweight. There's definitely, we've seen a couple of years ago, we actually did see some children with scurvy. They were placed on special diets and they had already had very limited intake. So the nutrient deficiency is real. And some of the changes, so the first thing that I like to do, as we said, is just to get that baseline, really healthy, nourishing, well-balanced diet there, because often the foods that children like to eat are very low nutrition. From there, if there's any kind of supplement that we need, we can explore that, and any focus on eating behaviors. Like I was saying, that mealtime routine is really helpful. And even we can look into special diets. Sometimes parents and children will just see improvements merely just by kind of getting that like baseline healthy whole food diet out there. But sometimes we do turn to special diets, gluten-free, casein-free or dairy-free is very popular in that population as well. There's a ton, GAPS diet. So there's a lot that we can try, but not every child needs to even make it that far, because just by cleaning up the diet, we'll see things like improved digestion, improved eye contact, focus, attention. Parents have seen improved language. So there's a lot of social skills going on. So you can really see tremendous results.
That's really cool. So do you have parents typically seek you out for, they know that making nutrition changes with their autistic child will help, or is it how does that come together? How do you end up working with these parents? Because I know that there's a whole sort of population in the autism world that kind of look at it like it's a genetic thing, and eating better is going to help because it helps everybody, but not necessarily looking to see those symptoms directly attributed to the autism improve.
Yeah, I think there is usually one of two parties, and there is a lot of people do seek and say, I know that there is so much going on with nutrition that can really help symptoms, and kind of who want that more holistic and natural route. So, lead me down that road because it's so overwhelming. And then there is another party who just says, I'm worried about my child. They have a very poor diet, and I'm worried they're not getting the nutrition that they need. So it tends to be one of those two.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
So certainly I would imagine that anybody listening who, this resonates with would want to be able to find out more about you or from you, or what's the best way for people to find you? What are you up to these days, and how can they seek you out?
Of course. Great. So my website is always a great place. It is jennyfriedmannutrition.com. I'm also on Instagram. I'm at autism.nutritionist. And on Facebook, I'm Jenny Friedman Nutrition. And I have a free Facebook group actually about nutrition for parents. That's really fun. So you're welcome to join that as well.
And what's the name of that?
That is, that's a great question. Nutrition for Autism I believe, I was just changing that. So you can definitely find that on the Facebook page. I can look it up right now. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
And what kind of stuff do you have on your regular website that do you have like resources there, or a way for people to contact you, or what?
Definitely. So all of my contact information is there. I have some of my favorite resources, books, a lot of resources on picky eating, and some of my favorite tools to get kids in the kitchen and to help with meal times. I also publish blog posts there twice a week. So it's a lot on definitely the picky eating and sometimes best foods for autism. Lots of tips to help parents. It's going to be in some sort of food and nutrition autism category.
Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it's fun.
Sounds great. Awesome. Did you mean you were looking up the group now?
No,
okay. I thought you were.
Didn't do it. Let me find it.
Okay. I want people to be able to find it if they're going to.
I know. Thank you. It's coming up. I should have it memorized by now.
Yeah. Well, they'll change the name. But there's quite a few groups out there that are related to parenting and autism.
There are indeed.
Methods and stuff. So want to be able to have people find the right one.
Thank you. Well, you'll find it on my Facebook page, and once my internet decides to come together.
Well, if it links from there, probably.
It's Nutrition for Autism. There we go.
Pretty straightforward. So you can just search that.
Yeah. Nutrition for Autism support group.
Okay.
Yeah, very official. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds like it. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your great insight and wisdom with us today. I appreciate that. I know that this is a hot topic for a lot of parents because it's a big struggle. a big pain point,
Yeah.
especially when they know that making the nutrition changes are going to help their children. But it's like, how do you get them to do it?
Yeah, it's
That's,
overwhelming.
yeah, for sure. And so just to have, someone who knows what they're talking about, be able to share some strategic tips and, well, overall strategy and then tips and that kind of stuff. Because a lot of times as parents, I mean, I have three little kids, and it's like you're there in the moment. It's like, what do I do?
I know, it's mayhem.
And so to
Yeah,
be able to kind of step back and have a bigger plan is definitely, helpful. So I
definitely. Well,
appreciate it.
I'm so glad, of course. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, awesome. So everybody go check out Jenny's Facebook and her group and website and all that kind of stuff. And definitely keep up with what she's up to. And we will talk to you again later.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Kids Eating Broccoli podcast. I hope you really got a lot out of it, and especially that you got some actionable items, some tips, some strategies that you can put into place today, tomorrow in your family so you can help make the next generation the best generation with us. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes and leave a review and a rating. You can also do that on Stitcher or anywhere else you're listening to this podcast. iTunes, of course, is the preferable one. You can also find us on the Kids Eating Broccoli webpage or at Facebook page, Kids Eating Broccoli. And the regular webpage is kidseatingbroccoli.com. All right, you guys take care, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye now.